everyone, and welcome to Ascension Day, a Warhammer 40,000 Gene Stealer Cult podcast. Today, I have Gord Weppler here with me. Gord, how you doing, man?
I'm doing very good. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Gord here has recently gone undefeated at the Wasted Potential GT. Going 5-0, bringing Broodsurge, and joining a pretty a list of guys who are starting to do pretty well with GSC. Kind of pull the win rate out of the dumpster, which is awesome to see. So Gord, where was this GT taking place at?
This was in Calgary, Alberta.
Okay.
Yeah, so kind of Calgary and Edmonton are the two big tournament spots in Alberta.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And
Yeah,
so I noticed it was actually pretty decently sized GT. I think it was over 40 players, I believe. Uh,
yeah. I think there ended
48
up being
players.
48. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, going positive with GSC for a lot of people right now feels like like a mountain to climb. So definitely going undefeated with Broodsurge, which is, I think right now everyone's on Team Claw, um, which rightfully so. Like I think Outlander Claw has a lot of really good tricks. I know there's quite a few Outlander Claw lists that are they're being played right now. I know Innes Wilson is took Claw to LGT. He's playing today. I think he had a 3-0 day one. So a couple other
Awesome.
guys. I saw Mike Porter is playing Claw. So I guess what is your thoughts of well, I'm seeing these guys taking Claw, but I'm gonna take Broodsurge. What are the diamonds that you're seeing within Broodsurge?
All right, I'll be very honest about what led me to Broodsurge. During the index, near the end of the index, I was playing triple aberrants in rock grinders with abominants, 3 5-man pure strains. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just I was at a GT and I was like, man, I just want to play like this. Like, I hope this is in the book. And I was at a GT and GW had released an article that was like a little teaser of the codex coming up. And it said
Mm-hmm.
in it, the if you remember that original teaser was like, and there's even a pure strain aberrant detachment called Biosantic Broodsurge. And I was just like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. I'm like, that's all I need to know is that there's a detachment for the stuff that I'm already playing. I obviously
Hell yeah.
wasn't maxed out on aberrants and pure strains because I had 2 Acco bombs in that list.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
As one
like
does.
everybody, yeah, as one
Yeah.
does. And 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 I was just like pumped. And I'm like, when this book comes out, I don't really care what else is in the book. I'm playing aberrants and gene stealers.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of what led me to Broodsurge. And then when the rules came
Mhm.
out, I loved how that detachment's rules are very self-synergizing. They're like, this is
Mhm.
what this detachment wants to do, and we're going to give you the tools to do this thing. And it takes the models that want to do that thing. And so I really
Mhm.
like how it is very self-synergistic, whereas some of the other detachments are a little like, we want some of this and some of that and some of this, and you really can't go all in. So, like, for example, Brood Brothers, right? I know that I'm
Mhm.
picking like probably the worst example, but it's like, hey, do you want to throw half of your points into something that doesn't use your army rule?
Mhm.
Even to a lesser extent, Xenocreed, which I think is still a really great detachment. It's like, how many
Mhm.
characters do you want to take that don't come back?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, no, I've recently been playing Xenocreed, and that's kind of funny you say that because like I started out with oh yeah, I'm gonna bring 9 of the good characters, and then that just started whittling away, because no, that's fucking stupid. I'm not gonna actually do that.
Definitely.
So I think you make a really good point that Broodsurge, like, it has a very concrete identity, which which means I think that, especially with the volatility of the army rule, that you don't need a whole lot of things to continue to make those units work, when and if they come back, which is, especially, I think Broodsurge, more than any detachment, loved the changes to Colt Ambush the most
They
because.
absolutely love it. And I'll
Mhm,
talk more about the preparation to like getting the list to where it was. But it touches on exactly what you said. Like, how do you get the units to benefit right out of the gate? Like, how do we
mhm,
get the buffs applied to the units without extra work, extra points, and how do we like maintain those buffs through the game um, without needing characters and things because the units don't come back with them. So are they still going to
mhm,
be useful units if they come back? Now that changed that errata that gave us that the change to our cult ambush was so massive. And there's kind of two camps, right? There's Xenocreed is the best at getting it back because it gives you a reroll.
mhm.
But Broodsurge is the best at using your units that come back because it takes
Absolutely.
stuff that doesn't need a character, and we're doing 6-inch deep strikes pretty reliably, just
Mhm,
with two targets. So there's, I love that when the units come back, they're a credible threat here and now. As soon as they're coming back, and that'll all play into how the detachment actually plays on the table.
mhm. Absolutely. So, um, you saw the brood surge because I think the brood surge was actually the first attachment that they teased
Mm-hmm.
whenever they started, like, kind of like leaking everything out. Um, were you, as soon as you saw those rules, like, yeah, I'm just on Team Brood Surge, or did you consider like focusing on any of the other detachments before kind of like focusing on Brood Surge?
So when the book came out, I read through the rules. I built a list for Broodsurge, Claw, and Host because Host of Ascent or not? Oh no, sorry, Xenocreed, because those three were the
Hmm.
first three most interesting to me. I'm not really like a
Hmm.
Brood Brothers fan. Like that doesn't. That's not what like keeps me going with the
Yeah.
faction. So I wasn't really interested in that, and that their rules are kind of a little bit of a mess because of that contradiction. Like I said, it's like take these points of stuff that doesn't work with your, and then set up to get this marginal buff. Like I'm not down for that.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
so I knew I wanted to start in one of those three ones. Outlander Claw looked really fun. Um, and but I immediately I wasn't like I don't really know how I'm going to do damage with this because the big thing when we got our codex, I'm like, okay, the three things that did damage in our book: demos, neos, and aberrants all got nerfed.
Mhm.
And not like little nerfs either. Like aberrants went down a strength and a damage, and lost the stain from the abominant. And the neos
Yep.
went to box lock, so you can't take like four seismic, four grenade, or sorry, four lasers or four grenade, or seismic if that's what you want to go in tech into, right?
Hmm.
And then the demos, what they did to our poor demos.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean,
Woo,
they're
not great.
unrecognizable. Like, is this even still our child? I don't even know, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so they found those three sources of damage in the book, and they just cut them all out at the knee.
Hmm.
And so when I was looking at Outlander Claw, and like I listened to the episode with Innes, and he's getting damage, and I see it like the reroll wounds, flamers. It's just stacking, and I get it, the recursion. But when I was reading the book, I was like, okay, I still want to be able to do some amount of damage to my opponent. I don't like love just like running onto objectives um
Hmm.
and playing that game. Like, oh, you know what's fun? Picking up the models that I spent forever painting. You know, that's that isn't why I play the game, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to like still be able to do stuff. And like I said, aberrants, like when you read the lore and it's like some guys like 10 years ago I was saying there's these monstrous things. Like I love that. I love like the pure
Mhm.
strains. I love the aberrants. I love that stuff. So I just wanted to play that stuff and I still wanted to be able to do damage. And then once you start actually playing the list, it is so fun to play.
Oh yeah.
Um, So that's why I went that way. And I'm going to be honest, every single game except for one I've played with the Codex has been Broodsurge. I've only played one
Mhm.
Xenocreed game. Um, and, and I had all these mining weapons into four greater demons. Sweet. Those need anti
Mhm.
monster, by the way, as
Yeah.
well as anti vehicles. See, this giant saw cuts through metal, not flesh or other things, though. you
Nope.
know,
Absolutely not.
so I've just been like kind of on Team Broodsurge as soon as the book
Mhm.
dropped, and been just hammering out games with just that detachment.
Yeah. Okay. That makes yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm gonna piggyback on what you're saying about like it is incredibly fun. I had like a I think like an 8 or 9 game stint when I was kind of just like muddling my way through the detachments because I am also even though I don't have any in my Xenocrate list I'm playing currently, I am also a big fan of Aberrants. So like just being able to take 20 to 30 of them and not feel like an idiot like felt really really good. Um so I guess looking at before we kind of go into your list, looking at Gene Stealer Cult as a whole, you brought up like, yeah, we took a significant nerf to our damage. We lost the +1 to the Cult Ambush roll for Battle Line. Host of Ascension lost like the recursion mechanic of being able to just drag neophytes back into deep strike without, now they have to get shot at and then you get to do it. So I think, myself included, like when the book first came out, it was pretty doom and gloom. Um, for quite a few people, but now like we're starting now that like some of the like guys like yourself and other guys that have been playing the army. I know I recently took GSC de Nova. Um, like I feel like now that we're actually like playing with the book and getting the reps in, we're starting to see like no, there's the army is still has like a lot of good tricks, a lot of good mechanics, and still has a lot of points of a lot of strength. So I guess in your opinion, like where do you see GSC as right now? Like not necessarily like a tier, but do you think that they're an army that still needs some love, or do you think it's an army that like someone could theoretically take to a major and like make top cut if not win?
That's a great question. I think that something that holds the army back is that your play style, dependent on the detachment, is pretty prescriptive. So I don't
Hmm.
think like they have a lot of like in-game flexibility. I know that's going to sound strange from like a deep striking army and stuff like that, but your game plan is pretty prescribed from the detachment that you bring. And
Hmm.
I think that they don't say like pivot between like doing different tactics during the game as well as some other armies do. So I think if you
Hmm.
have run into an opponent who has a good counter to your overall strategy, that creates some issues for
Hmm.
Gene Stealer Cult. And one of those can be, and I'll talk about it with like kind of what this list wants to do, but your opponent going first is really annoying.
Yeah.
I like going first, and I know in Pariah it's really good to go second, but I love going first because Brood Surge wants to fight your opponent in their deployment zone for the entire game while you're
Hmm.
sitting on the thing. So if they get to go first and move out, the game is just immediately harder. And that's a factor that's kind of outside your control. Or if they have a lot of flying units and can get up over your units to get towards the midboard, those are
Hmm.
the types of things. So I think that GSC have a lot of tools, but they're weak to their strategies getting countered, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Which I think is kind of like maybe a little bit of a unique problem amongst armies. Um, but I don't think that they're in like a horrible spot. Obviously, they are capable of winning. How much of their success is piggybacking off people don't know what they do. I mean, I just played in that GT, and probably like 3 of my 5 opponents were like, I've never played against GSC.
Yep.
And I was
Oh yeah.
shocked that there was a second GSC player in that event.
Hmm.
And so I think that it's kind of a mixture of that strength. I think if people played against the same list a few times, they would be like, oh, okay, I see. I kind of see what's going on here. And they'd start to unravel that a little bit because they would be able to start teching into that strategy. And that's something that they can do like during the game based on
Hmm.
whatever their army is.
Yeah. Yeah. You look at armies like Dark Angels with Gladius or Sisters, and it's just like any tool that they need, they have like at their disposal, like within a single list, not necessarily within the army. And it's like, okay, well, then you go to, I think, like what you said, like every GSC's attachment like has a mission. Like Host of Ascension, I'm dropping in and shooting you. Broodsurge, I'm dropping in and punching you. I think Xenocreed kind of gets a little bit funky because you could build that a few different ways, but Outlander Claw is like being being budget elves, essentially, just like kind of being everywhere and being annoying and just like death by 1,000 cuts. So yeah, it's like when you do run into that one list that my detachment just doesn't handle very well, which is something I noted when I was doing my testing games with Broodsurge specifically. Yeah, it's like, oh man, it's like playing knights into like an army with all Melta. Um,
Mhm.
you're kind of like, well, my options are very limited here. So yeah, I could definitely see that sentiment. Um, how about this? Let's go ahead and get into your list. We could kind of talk about what you brought. And then I kind of want to know how, before we kind of go into your games and your run, I want to know how your list kind of ran on the table, what your overall game plan was.
Mhm. And then,
We could
do you want to talk about iterations, like how we got
absolutely, yeah,
to this version? I'll
yeah,
kind of
for
talk
sure.
about it at this time.
Yep,
Maybe I'll talk about that leading into what the final version ended up being.
absolutely. Yep, that's perfectly good.
So I started playing Brood Surge with max pure strains, so 3 by 10, and a patriarch with the upgrade for the +1 damage and AP.
Hmm.
And I do really like him. His He ended up getting cut for actually a pretty specific reason, which is that if you play into an army like knights, you either can't use that unit or you give them CP. And
Hmm.
I mean GSC as a whole already isn't great at cracking vehicles
Yeah.
anymore. So I didn't want to give what was probably going to be a tougher matchup in another advantage.
Hmm.
And again, it's more points that don't come back. I used to play two trucks with metamorphs with biophages on them. Boy, oh howdy, does that unit do damage
Hmm.
when it comes out of the truck? Something with full rerolls because the truck shot it, and then it charges. And the amount of attacks you get, and the bonus from the detachment +1 attack on their 2 damage attacks is such a credible gain. They do a ton of damage. And so I started leaning away from other things like aberrants. I started with kind of a mix of trucks and 2 aberrants, and then I went down to 1 aberrant unit just to threaten a rapid ingress threat. And
Hmm.
then I ended up cutting the aberrants altogether, which made me very sad.
Oh.
And I would message my friend and be like, I'm not even running aberrants. I'm so sad. Like I just want to
Hmm.
run them. But when you have 1 unit, and we'll get to why there end up being 30 of them. When you get 1 unit, they get gang piled,
Yeah.
and it's really tough for them. And I was playing
Hmm.
the Metamorphs, but all you have to do is play against Thousand Suns once or twice before you're like, you know what? I'm tired of being allergic to flamers. Flamers on Overwatch. I can't even get my guys out of the truck and then they're incinerated, right?
Hmm.
And so it's like the Metamorphs were great damage if your opponent was bad. If your opponent was
Hmm.
bad, the Metamorphs were amazing damage. But here's the thing, you're not going to go through a GT and only have bad opponents. So you're going to get somebody who overwatches them off, or they get your truck gets popped and then they don't get the reroll wounds on the flamers, or the truck gets popped and they get wiped, and they even if they come back without the biophages and their damage goes way down because they don't have lethals. There's so many break points for them where your opponent has the agency over how effective they're going to be.
Hmm.
So I ended up 3 to 7 minutes before Lips submission on the Wednesday before the tournament. I was like, you know what? I don't want to get flamered. I'm just changing to 30 aberrants. And I had been
Hmm.
messaging in like my groups. Like somebody convinced me not to play 30 aberrants. People were like, I'm not going to do that. 30 aberrants are cool. And I was like, all right, here we go. And I switched to 30 aberrants with the theory in mind that your opponent can deal with 10 aberrants, but can they deal with 30 of them? Can they deal with 30 of them while they're choking on gene stealers?
Yeah.
And the answer is probably not. And so I didn't have any practice games with the 30 aberrants before I went into the GT. You'll notice if you look at my GT run, my points in each game actually goes up throughout each round of the tournament as I'm figuring out how exactly to play with the 30 aberrants. And the 30 aberrant build is, in my opinion, definitely better than the split with the metamorphs and that, because everything was just so frail and you had nothing that could stick around. And if I had stayed with the metamorph build, I don't think I would have gotten nearly as far in the GT. So I think that that's what brought me to the final list. And I don't know if you want to run over it. Um,
Uh, yeah. If you don't mind, just like kind of going through your list, top to bottom, and we can kind of dissect it a little bit further from there.
all right. First things first, we have two solo abominants. These don't go in the aberrant units. They're just wandering around melee las cannons. It's really sad that they don't have the aberrant keyword, even though they're
It's so
like super
funny.
aberrants,
It's
because
I didn't believe it
they
at first.
they don't. I know I didn't. I was like looking like forgot how to read. I'm gonna check it again, and
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it. But it's really important if people are playing this to not cheat your opponents. They don't get the +1 to charges. They don't get the extra attack on the charge. It's really sad, but it's true. So they're
Hmm.
not getting the detachment bonus, but they're still 100% worth bringing in there for multiple reasons. One, aberrants are decently strong, but that strength 12, just to wound many vehicles on threes and get that d6 +1 damage is really clutch. But that's not even the best thing about them. The best thing about them is how they're just a poor man's, like, you know, objective secured, like the holding the objective, right? Because they'll get
Like our
chopped.
poor
Yeah,
Autark, essentially. The Autark
yeah,
from Wish.
yeah, exactly. And it's like it's poor man sticky, right? Because he'll sit on like an objective kind of somewhere, and if somebody shoots him, he's like, two up, I'll
Mhm.
hold the objective. And
Yeah.
that's one of the best things about him. And you do need independent activations to do some of the missions.
Hmm.
So with me, I play Biosantic, fixed, every game, doesn't matter my opponent, behind enemy lines, and engage on all fronts.
Wow.
And I played fixed, behind, and engage in all 5 of my games, and it's what I've played for. I tried tactical with Broodsurge a couple times. I don't love it. I played fixed, behind, and engage ever since then, including all 5 rounds of the GD, including into nights. where you could bring it down or something like that. No, behind and engage, fixed every game. And the abominants, every once in a while, you'll get like the ritual where you have to make an objective, or you'll get
Hmm.
something where you still need to do something, some independent actions and things. And the abominants are great for that because they're okay just kind of sitting on a midland objective, screening out some area, doing the odd thing while the workhorses are kind of busy playing in the sprinkler, right?
Yeah.
So the abominants are really clutch to have in there, mostly for that like very budget sticky objective. Three
Hmm.
biophages on the three aberrant units. This gives them lethal, which is like really important. And since
Hmm.
to help crack tanks, and if you do run into things like custodes or possessed or all these tougher infantry, and even losing that strength from 8 to 7 means we wound most infantry on threes,
Hmm.
not twos anymore. This gives them like wound on twos against almost all infantry in the game,
Hmm.
right? Which is for a turn really clutch, and it was massive in my custodes game.
Yeah.
Now the three Keller morphs, these I don't know if building a GSC list without three Keller morphs as a starting point is going to ever be the correct decision. Keller morphs are so good for their points. They should be in every list. The reactive move, people love to screen out GSC behind and engage with this list. They're popping down in the corners. It's so hard to screen out a 32 mil base. Even people who are good at screening, it's really tough to screen out every spot at 32 mil could come down in your deployment zone to
Hmm.
get those secondaries for you. And I make one of them my warlord, and against knights, I just deep struck him in my deployment zone, and he was whatever
Yeah.
he's 60 points sitting
Hmm.
there instead of holding back an entire patriarch unit, for example.
Yeah.
Then there's the 5-man melee Akos. They're just mining CP on your home objective all game and
Hmm.
doing a great job, doing the Lord's work there. And then the fun, right? 3 times 10 aberrants. This is what people want when they're getting into the faction. It's what I
Yeah.
wanted, right? And and the strength of them comes from duplicate in the app and then hitting duplicate again. The
Yeah.
strength comes from there being 30 of them. It's definitely an exponential effect of strength the more of them there are, because it's easy to deal with 1 unit. It's kind of tough to deal with 2 units. It's really hard to deal with 3 units. And the thing about 3 units is you get 3 chances to roll if they come back. So you're very likely to get a 300 point boost right there. And
Hmm.
then you can also potentially get a unit back a second time, which has happened. The
Hmm.
Ridge Runners are there with a change. One of the only buffs we got in the book actually was that the Ridge Runner buff now lasts for the turn. And there's a lot of
Hmm.
people who don't realize that. They're just kind of used to it being a shooting phase buff. But this whole list is AP2 base, essentially, and you have AP3 on demand. And that is really, really nice to have. And it keeps
Hmm.
little squads of, say, those little 5-man squads a little more honest, to have a little bit of indirect shooting as well.
Hmm.
And then the Gene Stealers, I wish I could have 3 times 10, but you know what? This is the way the cookie crumbles. I'm not giving up a Ridge Runner, and I'm not giving up those Akos on my home base. So we end up with 1 unit that's only 5. But there's good news against armies that are scout heavy, say like Votan or World Eaters. That 5-man unit feels a lot better to throw it in front of their army than a 10-man unit that in case they go first, you end up losing, right?
Hmm.
And that is the whole list. It's very simple. It's basically the 30 Aberrants and the 25 Gene Stealers with a few support pieces. Very lean.
Yeah. No, I like how honest that this list is. Like, it's not trying to do a bunch of bullshit. It's literally like, I'm just gonna, like you said, I'm gonna keep you in your deployment zone all game. Something I wanted to kind of like expand upon, and because you bring up a good point. Um, so Aberrants did lose. a pip to their feel. I think almost everything in the game lost a pip to feel no pain. There's very, very, very few instances of feel no pains now
Hmm.
in the game. GSC still have it if you put a icon ward with metamorphs. But yeah, and aberrants, that was big, and so it did seem like they lost a lot of their staying power, but the point of that, it becomes exponentially harder to clear your board of aberrants when you have 30. And it's like, yeah, oh well, duh, Gabe, you have more, so yeah, it's going to take. But it is the fact of the activations needing, because you there's you're only playing against someone else who has 2,000 points of models as well. And each aberrant unit needs X amount of activations to kill whenever you have, the ability to give them go to ground. So give them cover and a 6-up invul and a 5-up feel no pain. So I think, yeah, whenever you're in the situation of like having 20, because I feel like having 30 of them in their face is probably not happening that often, and we can kind of talk about this in your games, but having 30 of them in their face at one turn isn't really happening, but it's more along the lines of, okay, I'm gonna blow my load, I'm gonna get all my shit out of rhinos, I'm gonna do everything that I need to do to kill these 10 to 20, and now here's another unit, now that everything's out of rhinos, which actually, having the 25 pure strains, that's still gonna drive a lot of things leaving transports, things getting out of position, chaff dying, screens dying, just because those because it's was it 50 attacks, I think, on
Yeah,
the
50 attacks
charge.
from the 10 man on
Yeah,
twos. It could be
exactly.
AP3.
And they're not easy to kill. Like 2 wounds with a 5-up invul, they're not like the easiest thing. Like it takes real dedication. Like I'm not even sure that like a single rubric squad could necessarily kill all 10 pure strains. Like it's gonna take a few, and there's 25 of them that are all
I know.
advancing and charging turn one. Like, no, I think that this list, like you said, it's very honest. Not a lot of bullshit. You do leave, and this is something I want to ask about. Leaving out the flamer acolytes. What did you ever consider them to be in the list, or was that something that you debated on?
No, I have almost no ranged attacks. My opponents would say, okay, like what do you have for range in this list? I'm like, literally, it's 3 Kellermorphs and
Hmm.
2 Ridge Runners. And then
Hmm.
there's like, I could throw a vial at you with a
Yeah.
Biophagus, I guess. And he has
Yeah.
an auto
Exactly.
pistol. Like
Yeah.
it is basically no. Like when we're talking about Honest Warhammer, this is this is as honest as it gets, basically. And one thing that I didn't mention as well is that one of the biophages does have the enhancement to infiltrate
Yeah.
one of the aberrant blobs.
The
So it's
predatory instinct.
5, yeah, it's
Yeah.
25 infiltrating gene stealers and 10 infiltrating aberrants. So when you talk about, well, how much is in their face first turn, it's all of that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Stuff is in there. It's all going in.
Yeah.
Like I don't really care like what my opponent has or what they're doing. It's all going in. So it's all
Hmm.
moving up and it's all charging, right? The Gene Stealer is advancing and charging. Because here's the thing. You're trying to drive at least one unit, if not two, into their deployment zone so you can score behind on turn one. Even if it's a small behind. A small behind is
Hmm.
still worth 3, I'm pretty sure. And the engage is like this list accidentally does engage. You have 4 infiltrating units.
Yeah.
Like you're guaranteed getting engaged every round with this list.
Hmm.
And getting behind is extremely easy with this. And eventually those Keller Morse, eventually on turn 2, one of them
Hmm.
will come down into their back corner, their back tippy top corner. And I've had multiple games, like even in the tournament, where they live there the whole game. Because
Hmm.
your opponent doesn't have resources to turn around to them. Because lots of times the reason why those Kelemorphs and stuff end up dying is because there's a unit back there that can't reach a frontline fight anyways. So it has nothing better to do other than turn around. Their backline units can reach the frontline fight against this
Mm-hmm.
list, and they have to be directed up to there because they have all this stuff in their face. So they don't really have the resources to turn around when those resources could be contributing to the frontline fight. So those
Mm-hmm.
Kelemorphs end up living longer in the backfield than they would against any other kind of typical list because it's the optionality, right? There's not a unit with the where their only option is going back there to kill them. So you
Yeah.
end up scoring points with this list purely passively. The list just is
Mm-hmm.
doing what it wants to do, and I'm scoring points. I'm not trying to do an action on objective or containing the edges of the board. We're not worrying about messing around with all that stuff. All we're doing
Mm-hmm.
is fighting you in your deployment zone and scoring points during the game. Now you figure out your game. You figure out how you're going to get a unit to do containment when there's 10 aberrants standing beside them. You
Yeah.
figure that out. All right. I'm going to put that pressure on you. You figure that out. I'm just going to play my game. You worry about how you're doing actions.
Yeah.
Have 30
And
aberrants and 25 Steelers in your face.
I think that like you finding a list that can reliably do fixed in a meta like with pariah, everyone just poo-pooing on fix, which for most of the armies who used to do fix, yeah, it's not. I think a lot of armies would rather like secret mission than necessarily than do fixed. So yeah, having a way to reliably do fixed is, I think, really cool, and especially with Gene Stealer Colt being the army that would traditionally just chug through CP at a huge rate. Um, I
To
get.
piggyback on that, right? Like you had
Hmm.
armies that were like really great at fixed, say like Eldar, right? Move,
Hmm.
shoot, like move and then fire and fade into their deployment zone. Okay. This is
Hmm.
awesome. We can get points passively. We could take fixed for that. But throwing a squad away, absolutely dead, and 2 CP
Hmm.
away to fire and fade them just to get it turn one. This
Hmm.
list does what it wants to do, you dealing damage and scoring points. I'm not spending CP or units to
Hmm.
get fixed. And I think that is the big distinction, right? And like
Hmm.
you can build for fixed, and this is why fixed is typically pretty bad because okay, I'm building for fixed. That means 500 points in my list and probably 6 CP over the course of the game is getting thrown away to do fixed. Whereas my
Hmm.
list isn't throwing CP away or throwing units away to do fixed. And I think that that is a
You're already
big
doing it.
difference.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. And like every now and then, like that unit that you use to go jam in there, it's just coming back. So.
Well, that's the thing, right? And that's why the units have to go in turn one. They're going
Mhm.
in turn one. I want as much time as physically possible to be rolling dice for stuff to come back. You talk about how Gene Stealers are sneakily tanky. You know how many times I had a massive frown on my face because one Gene Stealer survived? I'm like, come
Oh
on,
yeah,
just
it's
that
the
last
worst.
one.
Yeah.
Like like Ingron and he killed 9 of them because involves.
Hmm.
And then he's stuck there, and I'm like, oh, I don't get to roll. But Angron's totally screwed because he doesn't
Yeah.
get to fall back and do anything.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
it's like there's really not a lose case scenario. Either they kill it and you get to roll, or scores behind, scores engaged, ties up their unit. Like obviously that's the bigger win. But when they come back, they're just reinforcing that front line. One of the
Hmm.
weaknesses of this list is that it wants units coming back. If it doesn't, I mean, we all want units coming right back, but this list needs units coming back, reinforcing that front line,
Yeah.
um, and keeping that pressure up and keeping the units coming back into their deployment zone. I don't want to be fighting you in no man's land. I want you in deployment zone where my units engaged with your units are getting points. passively,
Mhm.
right? Without relying
Mhm.
on the killer morphs because they're not coming in after turn 3. There's no uppy downy. There's nothing like that, right? It's just
Mhm.
units pushing in. But there's a lot of
Mhm.
players who play against GSC and they're like, wait. Okay, just a sec. So if I kill those last 2 gene stealers, you'll get to roll for them to come back. And I'm like, right. It's like they're like, so I could just leave them and you don't get to roll. I'm like, right. And they will score behind and engage every turn.
Yeah.
So you make the decision that's best for you, buddy.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and
That's been the
and
case since 10th edition. I feel like because it's like, oh yeah, fine, I won't kill those last little bit of acolytes, so that way another bomb unit isn't coming back. It's like, okay, that's fine. He'll they're OC2 each. They have a banner. They're gonna just keep respawning dudes. That's fine.
oh, exactly it. And you're gonna start noticing a theme as I'm talking about this list. I'm just like, dude, I don't really care what you're doing over there. I'm playing this game here. You figure out the rest. Like my
Hmm.
game plan is very linear. It's very
Hmm.
straightforward. I'm not saying it's not fun or that it's boring or anything like that. It is a ton of fun to be jamming stuff into your opponent's face, making melee attacks, all the positioning that is involved with melee, right? It's a ton of fun. But all that mental load of like do about this is really on your
Hmm.
opponent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mental
You,
load is the stress from rolling that die to come back.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Well, let's go ahead and start going into your games. We don't have to break apart each game to turn by turn, but just your overall what was your overall thoughts in each matchup in here? Let me go ahead and bring up your because it looks like on round 1
Tyranids. This
Tyranids.
was triple Norn Tyranids.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
And this
Ooh,
is what I
that's a
mean
mhm.
by they went first, and I was like,
Mhm.
you've got to be kidding me. Because then 3 Norns are just running to the 3 no man's land objectives that they picked.
And get beefed up,
This
yeah.
this is why this game is so close. And I'm gonna be very candid here. And I don't know if this like takes away some of my credit, probably does, but this person did not have battle ready. So they were 10 points down and would have beat me if they were painted.
Mhm.
But them's the breaks in a tournament if you're not battle ready. So
Mhm.
they didn't have battle ready paint. And this is the only reason that I won. This was a super duper tough game against a melee list like this. One of the downfalls, like I said, if you can counter their strategy, you're you're a long way to beating them. Well, guess what? Knowing the turn, I'm obviously going to send in all my stuff and battle shocking my whole army. It's a pretty good counter to a melee
Mhm.
army,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
So my whole army got battle shocked and broken because it's all -1, -2 leadership on horrible leadership 7. So
Yeah,
aberrants
exactly.
aren't re-rolling charges, can't get extra can't get +1 to wound against the Norns. Like it is back breaking. And then they're battle shocked and they're all -1 to hit. He gets +1 to wound against them, which is huge because it's countering one of their best traits, which is how tanky they are.
Yeah.
So this is a brutal, brutal matchup. I didn't even think it was going to be that bad. I'm like, whatever. I hadn't played against Tyranids though, like not really, like not a build like this.
Mhm.
I've played against one Norn ever before, and I remember it being annoying to kill. And this is the same thing, but the flip side, right? If one Norn is annoying, 2 must be really annoying, 3 must be super annoying, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so they're doing the same thing that I'm doing with Aberrants.
Mhm.
And this is tough because I mostly because he got first turn, so he got to get to the and if he didn't get to the objectives as easily, then it would have been I think a lot different of a game. But it was a tough one. So I would be definitely
Mhm.
be on the lookout if you see a matchup like this that is kind of like playing a similar game plan. The that battle shock on the unit for the round against a melee army that's not world eater, right? Because world eaters, if they do try to do this to world eaters are like, whatever, okay, I just won't go in this turn.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas
I'm there.
mhm.
Like we're
Yeah.
playing the game. The trains left the station.
Yeah.
we're playing. Like there's no like game on, right? There's no like, I'm just going to
Hmm.
sit back here for a turn. Like, I have to be getting in there, try to block out the additional pieces from getting in, that type of thing. Also, got my 3 aberrant blocks, all got charged by lictors, which is gone,
Yeah.
right? And without the biophaguses to play into the Norns, oh man, like this is, it would be hard to write a list into the 30 aberrants, honestly,
Hmm.
if I'm being honest. So that was a really tough game.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the main takeaways from that. Is like, I think it really exemplifies an example where if your opponent has a counter to your strategy, that's when
Hmm.
GSC starts becoming very tough to play.
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, I can definitely see like the Maliceptor is just such a like GSC are allergic to -1 to hit. Like that is one
Mm-hmm.
of the worst things that you could give to us. Like between Maliceptors and Nurglings and Stealth and like Cloud of Flies from like Death Guard, like -1 to hit just really, really hurts GSC, which usually has historically always had, like okay weapon skill, but very poor ballistic skill. So yeah, getting through like I in my own games, getting through NIDS has always been very sticky. It's always like NIDS and any army that has just a metric shit ton of like 2-up armor with armor of contempt
Mm-hmm.
ability is always like getting through that. But I mean, I won't say like, the battle ready thing taking away your achievement here. So many games are also like won or lost by like, oh, if I make this 11-inch charge, then I win. If I don't, I lose. And then they make it. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's just how it happens. So, definitely,
Yeah.
I still think like, you going into this like, yeah, if you would have been battle ready, then sure, an extra 10 points, but you could have also gone first, and then a bunch of other things could have changed. So I still think of this as a pretty good win. Very close, but really awesome. Um,
Yeah. This was another game where, I mean, I think we should all take a moment every day to complain about our army rule
yeah.
because I just hate that there's a rule that you might not even get,
Uh
and
huh.
that there's a chance your army doesn't even get a rule is a complete non-starter. There's so many ways that they could fix this army rule. They could, you know how
Absolutely.
like Thousand Sons get cabal points for having leaders. Well,
Hmm.
Patriarch brings you 5 reinforcement points. The main characters bring you back like 4 each. Subcutters
Yeah.
give you 3 or whatever, and then you just have reinforcement points like during the game, and like aberrants cost like 5 to bring back, or whatever you want to do with it. Right? It's like there's so many ways to do this army rule, but the current way is either you feel bad or your opponent feels bad,
Oh yeah.
and
Um,
so it's just not a well done rule. It needs another look, because like this is one of the games where I only got, I think, 2 Gene Stealer units back, and
mhm,
that's not what I needed in this game. And so
mhm,
that factor made this game a lot tougher as well. There was a lot of factors into that game,
mhm.
but I'll talk about the flip side of that later on.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah, because then you have the
um,
games where your opponent's playing against 4,000 points of Gene Sealers, and it's like, oh well, okay, that's fine.
your opponent is like, I had an opponent say to me, I won't say which one, but I had an opponent say to me, "Hey, really good tactics, I guess. Roll well on your return units." And it's like, well,
Yeah.
ouch. But also, I feel your pain. I see it. I see you living in it. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Nice.
So,
Round
yeah.
two, Imperial Knights.
Imperial Knights. This is a game that is really tough to win with the Metamorph build, which is why the Aberrants are so much better, because they are just the profiles for knights. Like, the big knights are scary. The little knights, who cares? Like, honestly, they could just
Hmm.
not be on the board. I don't care. They do nothing versus the aberrants effectively. The shooting ones all get tied up by gene stealers. You just lock them in their deployment zone. They can't fall back and do stuff. So you're just, engaging
Oh
them,
yeah.
ensure they can shoot and stuff in melee, but then they're not moving up the board. Like this is like a pretty binary game, honestly. I had
Mhm.
there and they it's tough for them to go through. They can go through terrain, but they still need to be able to get to the other side. So if you're like an inch from the wall on the far side,
Yeah.
they can't fight you up against the wall and they have to go around still because they can't get around. So that infiltrating aberrant unit is like on them first turn.
Mhm.
Pretty
And
easy
there's
on
nothing
W
they can
on
do about it.
GW terrain to like put them in a spot where they're not in any danger. And then I got first turn top of one, just charged into a lancer, so I didn't even get to do its charging stuff. And then I mean it took like 2 or 3 combats, but it went down eventually,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
they're just the big shooting knights are the scary ones, but they're just fighting to get out of their deployment zone the whole game, and
Mhm.
it's really tough. So this is like a pretty binary game. You're just like super aggressive, and you're just putting stuff against all their stuff, and they can't really move
Yeah.
forward or do anything. So, um, like this is a matchup that would be really scary before the
Mhm.
changed aberrants, but with aberrants, like they're dying pretty fast.
Yeah. Mhm.
So
Yep. No.
I there's not too much to comment on that one, really.
Mhm.
I know some GSE players are. I had a comment when I posted in the GSE group where they were concerned about knights. Knights are really victim to getting fought in their deployment zone. Even they're a pretty quick army. They
Mhm.
can't be moving past you and be doing what they want to be doing.
Yeah.
And every time that they try to get past you, they're sacrificing like 150 point activation, right? To try and like
Yeah.
fall back to move up the board, whereas other armies are maybe doing that with 60 point units or 50 point units. So
Mhm.
it's tough for them.
Yeah, and I think something to note for the listeners is knights are an army that kind of need 5 games of Warhammer. They generally don't blow out games unless they like run to like an army that like just has zero anti tank.
Yeah.
So anything you can do to disrupt like a couple turns, like you said, just body blocking them. Like you even have to do damage just keeping them there like over
Mm-hmm.
2 turns puts them so massively behind because knights
They didn't
really
get to a
want.
no man's land objective till turn 3.
Yeah, exactly, so you could not have killed a single knight after that point and still probably have won just
Exactly.
because they need that presence and they need to be able to dictate the tempo of the game. And if knights aren't able to dictate that tempo, then they just kind of fall apart. So no, great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a pretty convincing score into the knights. All right, so on to game 3. It's looking like you have CSM. Wow, really good win into CSM. That was almost 60 point win. How'd this go?
So this is somebody that I actually play against regularly, like go to the same club as I do.
Hmm.
And so part of this is like really well, and I have lots of experience into the player. He was
Hmm.
very confident leading into it because he had like some pretty like he had possessed, and possessed have a good
Hmm.
melee profile into aberrants.
Hmm.
Because low AP but multi damage is like that is kind of the your golden ticket into aberrants or anything that can wound them relatively easy. Like you don't need AP into aberrants, right?
Yeah.
So um, his big mistake in this one was he got first turn and basically didn't move
Hmm.
because I had all my infiltrators out and he was kind of like scared to
Commit.
really move out, and
Hmm.
and then the noose is just like yoink around
Yep.
his neck, right? Because the whole list goes in anyways, and then you're again he just ended up fighting in his deployment zone. Like you have to move out. You've got to get out and start getting to the objectives. I know it's scary out there in the wild when there's gene
Yeah.
stealers and aberrants, but if you don't move out of your deployment zone, the game is already over. Like if you
Exactly.
get first
Yeah.
turn, you've got to start getting out there. Like this is for the people who might be listening to this episode. That's like, what do I do against this list? You've got to get out there. And I know it's
Hmm.
scary because the aberrants are out there. I didn't reserve a single aberrant block, not even for a rapid ingress, not for the whole tournament. The only thing in Deep Strike the whole tournament was the 3 Keller morphs.
Telemorphs. Hmm.
And that was part of like I messaged Bilbo from the GSC group, who very active obviously, and I was like, "How do you play 30 aberrants?" And he said that it's kind of matchup dependent. I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to put them on the board because the sooner they get into combat, I don't want them coming in on turn two, then not dying till turn three, and then I am rolling a five up. You know,
Hmm.
I'm just like, I just want them getting into combat as soon as possible. So I full deployed, except for three color morphs in each of my games. I did consider in one of my games doing a rapid ingress aberrant unit, but then I was just like, you know what, this is working out really good, so I'm just gonna
Yeah.
keep doing what I'm doing. And
Hmm.
so he didn't move out of his deployment zone. I went into him. Here's the thing: Marine profiles. This list absolutely swallows Marine profiles.
Oh yeah.
Um, so there's like all the AP2 and 3, and it's all the right strength band. So their army just ends up melting really quick. Forge Fiends, super scary against the Aberrant Blobs. But aside from that, you know, you it's really you trade pretty favorably into their profiles, I think, and I think it
Hmm.
really just exemplifies that if you let me just stop you at your deployment zone, the game is over. Like
Hmm.
it is really tough for lists to get past this because you have to remember we're talking about 55 models, but 90 wounds of aberrants, and it's 50 wounds of gene stealers.
Yeah.
So you have 140 wounds across these 55 models that are blocking you in your deployment zone, and that's before we start a conversation about what comes back.
Hmm. Exactly.
So you have to be very like cognizant if you're that player facing this list that you're going to get hemmed in, and then what are you going to do? How are you going to get out of your deployment zone past this stuff when I have more
Hmm.
stuff dropping in on no man's land objectives? Because that's where I want to set the line of engagement. I want to fight at your deployment zone, and then all my stuff is coming in on the no man's land objective and trying to charge your deployment zone from there. But if
Hmm.
not, like if I fail my charge or whatever, I'm on an objective in the no man's land, right? And that's where my
Yeah.
abominants are. And maybe one ridge runner will sneak his way up there. You never know. Or there's like a Kellermorph on one. You know, they're
Hmm.
they're very scantily held land
Hmm.
objectives with like
Hmm.
OC1,
Yeah.
but you got to get to it first.
Yeah. And this actually kind of brings up a pretty something I wanted to talk about. So into these melee heavy matchups, normally those abominants are running around being solo las hammermen. But with the against a melee heavy army, have you has there been any consideration that you've had of attaching them to the aberrants to give them the fight on death?
Um, no, mostly because I need them to be like poor man sticky in a
Yeah.
lot of cases, including in the melee matchup sometimes. Um,
Hmm.
they're in the melee matchup, they're also really great for like, oh, I died and then I melted on your face. And then
Hmm.
I'm back and then I died and I melted on your face.
Yeah.
Um, so that strat actually gets used quite a lot. And it's an infuriating strat because I have to randomly roll to see if I can do random damage to you. But
Yeah.
it is like even the threat of it is pretty good. So I like that the biophages is where they were because here's the thing: if I sub them out, then the biophages are just dead weight.
Yeah.
Like they're not doing anything. They're literally doing nothing, and they're T3, 3 wounds, 5 up save. Like,
Hmm.
and they don't do the poor man sticky. They just they're just completely useless.
Yeah, for sure.
So I never even considered subbing out the leaders or anything like that because here's the thing: lethals are always good,
Yeah.
even if you're wounding on threes. A third of the time, those drop. So I'll take
Hmm.
lethals whenever I can, right? And against like a melee match. So we're talking about possessed here that are T6. My next game was into World Eaters, tons of T6. So having that access to that +1 to wound is also very big.
Hmm.
We can probably lead right into that. So that was end of
Yeah.
day one. And then we
Hmm.
head into day two, and I get like my nightmare matchup, the matchup I absolutely did not want, which was World Eaters. And I think that if your gameplay is melee and then you play into World Eaters, you probably have a bit of brown pants
Oh
because
yeah.
what are you going to do? And now I'll make this worse. I've never played against World Eaters since our index was insanely OP at the release of 10th. And you could
Mhm.
literally just like throw out two auto comeback neophyte units, and like there was no way that they could win, right? And
Yeah.
um, and then, but now it's like World Eaters are a really solid army. They've got a great game plan. They do melee better than me, um, and I know he can reach me in my deployment zone, and I don't want to happen what I'm doing to other people. So
Mhm.
this game, I had no experience into the matchup, didn't know what to expect, knew he was good in melee, so I told my opponent, "Fortune favors the bold." Plan. I'm deploying on the line. I go first. I deployed all my stuff
Mhm.
up, and five, and I rolled a six, and I charged him in his deployment zone. And
Woo!
he fought that game in his deployment zone, which is probably the first time he ever had. We were taking pictures. It looked like it was 18th century warfare. We had two massive melee armies just blocked
Yeah.
each other, not hiding behind terrain or anything because neither of us have guns, and colonial warfare. And then we ended up with a 50 model mosh pit in the middle of the board.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
and he was like, "This is the craziest game of Warhammer I think I've ever played." And I'm like, "Ditto," because
Yeah.
I'm going in and his stuff is so lethal,
Oh
right?
yeah.
But less lethal if at least I get to do the charge, and my stuff is also more lethal on the charge. So we both really want to be charging each other. I
Mhm.
eventually wore him down, but he was cutting through stuff like crazy.
Mhm.
I ended up getting 100 points back this game, which is maybe the high side of average. I'd say like you really want 600 points back. If you get less than 600 points back, you're hurting unit. If you get more than 600, you're doing pretty good. So like this, I'd say this is more than average. Um, and like I said, little things like one gene stealer from two different units survived in his deployment zone. Turn one, there's my full behind enemy lines, and a unit of 8 bound and Angron are tied up for the turn.
Mhm.
Right.
Which
And
is
then they
huge.
auto die
Yeah.
on his turn, but then I get to roll for them to come back. Right. So
Yeah,
this was
exactly.
this one was really like, pistols at dawn, could go either way. Um,
Mhm.
he had won the last GT in Calgary, this guy, with this exact same list. So he's very experienced with it. But he fully admitted that he had never played against Gene Stealer cults before.
Mhm.
So didn't know what to expect. And I don't think it was fighting in his deployment zone. So that game
Mhm.
was honestly just vicious, right? It's just two melee monsters ripping each other apart.
Yeah.
And it came down to he had assassinate and two spawn in combat with an abominant, and the abominant had to kill one of them to make sure he didn't die for assassinate. And he
Mhm.
ended up getting one, and the other spawn couldn't kill him. So
Oh.
it was like insanely close,
Mhm.
and that one change would have made him win if he had won. If he had killed that abominant, he would have won 98-97, which would have been an insane finish game, right? Like so
Yeah.
close, but that's how razor thin that game is. And I want more experience in that matchup because I don't think the way I played it is obviously the smartest way to play it. Um, but it was not a matchup where I expected to win. I expected to get rolled pretty hard in that one.
Mhm.
Um, but I was able to just kind of just do the thing. That's the thing is like with this list. I think one of the strongest things about this list is like just do the thing. When in
Yeah.
doubt, do the thing. Right? Get into their deployment
Mhm.
zone, charge them, do the thing. So
Yeah.
as long as you're kind of following that mantra, I think that this list will serve you. It's when you start wavering and being, oh, I don't know if I should put this unit, or I don't know if I should. I think that's really going to hamstring you at this list. If you want to play this list,
Mhm.
you have to do the thing and be willing to do the things consistently.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. And I think something that like you kind of hinted on is well, I don't know if you necessarily hit on, but when you're in these games where like you should lose. Like I should lose against this army. That's when you really have to just be like, okay, well, I lost at list building, so I need to win on the dice roll. And if you don't, I mean, if the dice don't go then your way, like you're gonna lose anyway. Like it was already gonna be bad. Starting on the line, that's huge. That's something you can do to be, take advantage of whatever like good dice you have, but also like utilizing the army rule as best as you can, jamming everything turn one, turn two, having them die so that way you get to roll fours instead of fives. That's also huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say from experience, this like MSU eight bound and exalted eight bound like world eaters list is fucking hard. Like MSU
Mm-hmm.
eight bound are just there's such an like if it's a big brick, it's like okay, I know how to deal with bricks. Like I'm a Gene Stealer cult player. I know I can kill bricks of things. Like that's not an issue. It's whenever it's like it's MSU, but they're still pretty hard to kill. Then it's like, oh shit, like how much am I dedicating resources to? You know what I mean? Then that's it. It starts to get really funky at those stages. So yeah, getting that win, I think is really awesome, and especially yeah, playing against the anti melee army. You know, who have sources to -1 damage, fight on death, feel no pain. Like, just it's so hard to be able to charge
Yeah,
into
he
world
took
eaters
feel no
reliably.
pain. Yeah, he took feel no
Hmm.
pain and fight on death every round.
Hmm.
And it was a bloodbath, man, I'm
Yeah.
telling you. And
Yeah.
the biggest tool I think he has against my list is the Mo brick, right?
Yeah.
Fights first, crazy Mo damage. And I think the biggest mistake that he made in this game was he charged me with it. He
Hmm.
charged into the aberrants with it, um,
Hmm.
a unit of aberrants, and he tried really hard to play around heroics from me
Hmm.
by putting one single eight bound that lived. So you imagine my three aberrant units are kind of side by side, shoulder to shoulder. Okay. Um,
Hmm.
he charges into the far right one, and he puts an eight bound into the center one to stop that unit from heroicing into the one that's on the far right into his Mobrick. But
Hmm.
then I heroiced the eight bound my far left unit.
Hmm.
And that
So,
gave me the distance to get around and still get into the Mobrick on his turn.
yeah.
Um, and I think that was his huge mistake because if he had kept that Mobrick in his lines, and every time I send something in, it's getting heroicked by a fight first unit, that would have been brutal.
Yep.
But he tried to
Yep.
play around it, but you have to remember your heroics and stuff like that and your angles. And there's so many
Hmm.
things that this list looks basic, but you still have a ton of tools, ton of like optionality on your turn that you can exercise, right? Like being a good player, you can flex that with a list like this. Like this isn't like a dumb man's list. Like just like world eaters, people think of them as like a kind of a simple, straightforward army. They are absolutely not. And
I yeah. I think honestly, world eaters are one of the hardest armies to pilot in the game. It's so easy to just go ooga booga, the nails are biting, I mean, blood for the blood god, and move forward. But like good world eaters players, like they're like it's like art. You know what I mean? It's like a symphony of pain. it's they
oh, exactly.
yeah, yeah, good world eaters players like can do crazy things with that because you have to do that with that army. Yeah, yeah, I would never look at a world eaters player and be like, oh yeah, I have some shooting, it's gonna go fight. Like, no, no, not necessarily. They have a lot of tools at their disposal. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but
Definitely. Yeah.
yeah. I and something you bring up, which I think is huge, and anyone who's playing just Warhammer in general, but especially GSC, the biggest thing that you can use heroic for is not necessarily um just to get units stuck in. It's to use it on something that you know you're gonna kill just for mobility. You get to move on
Exactly.
your opponent's turn now. That's another 2d6 inches you get to move up the board. As long as you're within six, which is huge, especially if you're playing an army like this, where you don't have trucks, you have transports, everything's starting on the field unless it dies. So it's like any inch that you can get to claw yourself up the field, especially with aberrants, where people are
Hmm.
trying to avoid them, like that's huge.
That's just the
And
thing too, is that unit got slingshotted up because I rolled
mm,
like a 9 or something on my heroic, which whatever. I mean, that's very within reason. And then I'm just
mm,
slingshot from my far left flank all the way over into this unit, and then that unit just walks up and charges him in his next turn. Like
yeah.
units that were like 20 some inches away, but
Mm,
not anymore.
yeah.
So
Yeah, because I think you'll notice, especially, and I'm sure you've seen it, but for anyone's listening, you'll see a lot of times in mid tables, people are trying to use some of these concepts, like, oh, I'm going to tag you with a rhino, because I don't really care about the rhino, and now you're stuck over here. Um, they'll do that, but without thinking of the follow-on consequences. Warhammer, like any other strategy game, is a game of you take from me, I take from you. You know what I mean? Like you hurt me this way, I need to hurt you that way. Like you can't just
mhm.
allow people to do things for free. So you tag me with a rhino, that's fine. Like I'm gonna make sure it dies. I'm gonna spend some CP. I'm gonna get +1 to wound against it, and then I'm going to spend another CP to drag 10 aberrants up the board and, utilize that to, like you said, to slingshot. So any opportunity you can have, even if it's just like, oh, I'm going to charge these guys in just because I want to, okay, use that. They may not be thinking about that heroic, or they may not care about that heroic until now all of a sudden, now you're flipping primary. Now you're
Mhm.
dragging aberrants up the board, and especially, I know you don't have it in this list, but I think it's Alien Majesty. It's the enhancement that allows the unit to give -1 OC
Yeah,
when they're
yeah,
in combat. That's huge. Heroicing with that unit is absolutely huge. Um, just to flip primary, out of the blue when people aren't expecting it. But
totally. And about enhancements and stuff like that, not only do I not have literally, well, I have 5 points to spend in this list, but not only do I not really have points to spend, but
mhm,
one of the premises switching from the meta truck to this list was how many points do I have that doesn't use my army rule? So
mhm,
add up your characters, add up your vehicles, right? How many points do you
mhm,
have out of your enhancements that you don't get back?
mhm,
And I freed up 500 points extra list that can come back by switching to 30 aberrants,
mhm,
right? So something that I would very caution like GSC players to do is when you write a list, ask yourself how many points of my list can come back, because you
mhm.
rule is works, but if you're not giving yourself a chance to roll those, you're really
Yeah.
doing yourself a disservice, and it can become really easy to add tons of characters, tons of enhancements. I'm not saying that's a bad enhancement, but anyway,
Mhm,
but you can add tons of points to your list that doesn't come back, and even the Patriarch was one of those, right? I mean, I think he's
mhm.
what 85 points or something like that, and then it's 25 points for the extra AP and stuff, something like
Yeah.
that. And so you're looking at a pretty expensive piece that again doesn't come back. The trucks
Mhm,
don't come back. All these things, right? So ask yourself when you're building your list, like, is the bonus that I'm getting from like this character and this enhancement or whatever, is that outweighing the
mhm.
the opportunity of having more units that could come back?
Yeah. I mean, in the words of probably one of the most famous Canadians ever, Mr. Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So,
Exactly.
and yeah, exactly. Like the army rule, yeah, a lot of times doesn't work, but it will 100% never work if you never try and use it.
Right.
And the thing is like these games where we should be losing, when that army roll kicks, that could be it. You know what I mean? That
Hmm.
could be like that 5-up on those aberrants that you really fucking needed. That could be what wins the game. And when you're thinking about GT, that's what you need. You need every one of those little advantages you can have.
Yeah,
Um, but,
and this is a specific example, but this is like most games you're going to play. So that was 97-93 in that World Eaters game. Well, guess what? I
mhm,
had a 5-up roll for Aberrants come back and then take his home objective and kill 2 units on it
mhm,
on like turn 4 or 5 or whatever it was. Well,
mhm,
that was probably the difference in points right there. So it's
mhm,
like if I don't have units that can come back, then those
mhm.
opportunities for that type of thing don't exist,
Yeah.
right? So you
Mhm,
need that stuff. You need to be very mindful of the balance that you play, and that's why I don't love like Brood Brothers, and to a lesser extent why I don't love Xenocreed is because Xenocreed's like take characters and every one of our enhancements, like 3 of them are amazing, and they are, but it's like three
mhm,
character, in the list, 3 enhancements, 4 trucks maybe, and you have like a really nice Xenocreed list at the start of the game, and half of it doesn't come back or roll
mhm,
to come back, right? So it's
mhm.
like really easy to fall into that really quick. Anyways, that was a little detour on GSU list design, but um, um, and then the last game, Custodes. Custodes got massive buff with the change to their detachment, their shield host detachment. The fact that they can
Yes.
choose per unit and they get it every round. It's not a once per game. That was so horrible for them to have. Like,
Mhm.
poor went out for them when it was once per game. They got to get exploding fives or whatever.
The
But
the
now
golden
let's
wa, yeah.
yeah. But now let's focus on what they are in real life now, right? You have an entire army of pretty lethal dudes, 7-2-2 on basically everybody with like 5 attacks, and they're all sustained
Mhm,
fives and hit on twos, which means they're getting more hits than they have attacks. Um, this is a pretty lethal melee army. If people haven't played against it recently, they
mhm,
do a ton of damage in melee. And my opponent knew this, and he had obviously exercised this on his way to undefeated as well, because he was undefeated going into the last game. It was actually the other undefeated person who got paired down into my world leader's opponent.
mhm.
And he was like, "Don't worry, Gord. If you win your game, you'll be the only undefeated." But it didn't happen that way.
Yeah.
But um, he he was very confident in his melee, and he's like, dude, I'm not scared of your melee. And the world leader player was like right there packing up his model. He's like, dude, I'm way better at melee than you, and he just beat me.
Yeah.
So that should have been like a precursor to him, like
Mhm.
deploying. He's like, charge me. That's where I want to be. Just charge me. And I straight up told him, I'm like, I wonder if you'll be saying the same thing from 2 rounds from now.
Yeah.
And he was not. It was brutal. I mean, the score is like pretty, like, it's not a crazy differential, but that game was never really out of control. I was just
Yeah.
charging him. I charged him with a bunch of Gene Stealers and stuff, and it's like he was forced to pop Feel No Pains on his Warden units. He had 3 big Warden blobs and then a guard blob,
Oh, yeah.
and he had to pop the Feel No Pains on them because that's the thing. This list comes at you kind of in 3 main waves: the Stealers with the one aberrant unit, then the 2 more aberrant units plus whatever came back, plus all the stuff that's coming back now or failed its charge from the previous turn. So those are like the
Mhm,
three kind of main waves. Um, and so you come at them originally and it's about 50 attacks, and they wound on fives, and they're all on inballs. So you can't
mhm.
risk not popping the Feel No Pain because you could just lose half your wardens.
Yeah.
Like, and that's not unreasonable for that to
Yeah.
happen,
Yeah.
right? So he
Yeah.
pops the Feel No Pains, and then the Feel No Pains are gone when the aberrants come.
Mhm,
And that's really where you don't want to be because the aberrants pop their like mini feet, like they're once per game to wound the custodies on twos or threes, on the character or cloak the wardens. And then they're just dropping. And here's the thing, they don't they
mhm.
don't come back. So they're chewing through, and with the old metamorph list, there's nothing you could put into a custodies unit that would survive. Put 10 metamorphs in and they'll
Mhm.
all be wiped back. And whereas this, aberrants are lingering around for multiple rounds in combat with Custodes, multiple rounds
Yep.
of combat. And every time
Yep.
they're just boom, 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 we're knocking a few down, right?
Hmm.
And they just start losing stuff, start running out of
Yeah.
stuff. And the profiles are amazing. I mean, you couldn't make it better. Like everything in my army baseline puts you on your invul
Hmm.
without me doing any work. Like this
Yeah.
is exactly where you want to be. Um, this game, like I apologize to my opponent, 1,425 points back. It was the endless tide of aberrant
Oh,
and gene stealers. He
yes.
had to kill my army. So I had full aberrant blobs at the end of the game just wandering around like, should we start playing board games? Or like they have nothing to
Yeah.
do. These aberrant units that were coming back, they were just hanging out in his deployment zone because like he was scoring points, whatever. Like his
Hmm.
stuff was mostly gone, but like um this is one of those games where it's like if you've got like this was a good profile matchup. They do good damage, but it's just not sustainable. And
Hmm.
I didn't think so either. And there was one point where I didn't know if I was going to be playing. I thought it was going to be him, the Custodes player, or the Tau player. And I was like, I don't know which one of those I really want. And then I got the World Eaters. I was like, well, I definitely didn't want that.
Hmm.
But the Custodes one, I felt pretty confident going into it. He spaced them all out, which is like awesome. Like they couldn't even heroic into each
Yeah.
other's combats. And this was like, this is what I want. I want to isolate these blobs, make them use their feel no pain, and then hit them with aberrants, right? And so
Yeah.
you have to just be really smart about this. And but the overall game plan doesn't really change. Like maybe you don't send in your gene stealers into combat like your little 5-man because they'll just auto get picked up, but they just like sprinted from infiltrating into his deployment zone. It's like boom,
Yeah.
there's behind turn one, right? And then you're just tying them up with all this other stuff. That train started really hot with the units coming back. I sent in 2 gene stealer units into his 2 warden units. He killed them both back, the 2 10-mans. Both came back on my turn.
Ooh. Hmm.
And here's the thing: when you
Your
lose stuff
is just huge.
on
Yeah.
your turn, you're like, okay, show you something. This is the way the army rule used to work. your blip.
Still
You're
use
like,
it.
I can still use it. It's a little known gem, but when units die on my turn, I'm probably taking them up from these blips because
Hmm.
those then on my turn get to advance and charge away from those blips, right? So you
Yeah.
get like you're not looking for deep strike charges or anything like that. So
Absolutely.
that it's really clutch to also remember that we did have the army rule as it was before, and it's not like a
Hmm.
rewrite into reserves. It's we still have the option. So if you're losing stuff on your turn, which absolutely happens between Overwatch and competent melees and heroic interventions and all that kind of thing, that you still are aware that I need to actually still put blips down for these guys in case I want
Hmm.
to
Oh yeah.
actually take them in the old fashioned way.
Hmm.
I just remind my opponents, and it's I don't know, it's not like a psychological trick or anything, but I just tell them they're like, oh, so if I go near those, that unit's gone. I'm like, no, like they can go be in reserve or whatever. So like I don't know,
Hmm.
run towards it if you want, and your opponents are mostly like, whatever then, you know. So uh, anyways, that was just kind of a thing where they were like, I'm gonna do this really well, and I'm like, I'm gonna bet you I'm gonna do it better twice. So um,
Now, did you go first in this matchup?
I did. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I went first in the Custodes matchup and the World Eaters one. I went second against CSM. I went first against
Hmm.
Imperial Knights and second against Tyranids. So kind of as even as you can get. It's going to be 2 and 3
Yeah.
one way or the other. Um,
Uh,
but yeah.
what would you have thought going into
Oh,
that
actually,
Custodians game if
sorry.
you went second?
I did go second into the Custodians game because he moved up to the No Man's Land objective with one of his Warden units, top of one. So he went first in
Okay.
this game, and
Oh,
it
okay.
was ritual, and he moved up and he made an objective up in No Man's Land. that he had a unit of
Mm-hmm.
wardens on. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
in my head, I'm like, thank you for making me an objective. You know, because that objective just got absolutely dive bombed by my infiltrating aberrants and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he did go first in this one, and he did like start moving up. But this one, he actually has pretty credible shooting, right? AP 1-2 damage.
Yeah.
So I don't really want that. And he had the unit of guard with what's
Draxus.
the Draxus, and like
Yeah.
that unit actually shoots. And he had two of the tanks as well with the 4 las
Mm-hmm.
cannons. And so I was like, I had to deploy a little bit more conservatively than I would normally want to
Mm-hmm.
do, because I didn't want to get shot up that much. Mostly
Gotcha.
because like those guns are just ruthless into gene stealers, because it's just like I'm
Mm-hmm.
taking involves and then everyone you fail is a dead guy.
Yeah.
And then the las cannons are just brutal into the aberrants, because with the 5-up
Mm-hmm.
feel no pain, you just don't get the swings you used to get. Like with the
No.
4-up feel no pain, every once in a while you're like, take 6. Okay. Oh, I rolled 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's not like
Exactly.
super crazy when you had a 4-up, but that just doesn't happen really
Yeah.
anymore with the 5-up. So like those
Mm-hmm.
las cannons just are amazing into the aberrants, and then all their spears are amazing into the gene stealers. So I couldn't afford to just let him get tons of free value. So I had to
Mm-hmm.
deploy pretty conservatively.
Mm-hmm.
So him going first was actually a little bit of a service there, because if I had gone first, I wouldn't have been able to fully utilize it. But with him going first, he ran up to the objectives, and I was like, okay, well, this is one
Yeah.
where I will fight you on them, and that's how he ended up with still 60 whatever points, is because he did have a couple of turns of primary in there while the rest of my army
Mm-hmm.
was still moving up, right? Like my other 2 aberrant blobs were still moving up, and he had lots of guys because their OC is nuts, right? You're looking at
Mm-hmm.
3 OC per guy because of the Vexillas, right? So
Yeah.
that you have to kill them off, because even like
Mm-hmm.
3 of them is almost an aberrant squad's worth of OC. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Plus the blade champ in there. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and he is ruthless. He's a ruthless
Oh yeah.
fellow.
Well, that's great. So ending day 2, 5-0, um, beating your expectations, like you said, you're just trying to go positive. So
Mm-hmm.
how'd that feel? I bet it felt great.
It felt really great, and honestly, like everybody knows, GSC is having a rough time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people like came up to me like, "Hey, Gord, you're playing your GSC," and I'm like, "Totally." They're like, "Why are you taking them when they're so bad right now?" And I
Mm-hmm.
just straight up told people, I'm like, "I haven't been to a tournament since, and I want to play them because
Mm-hmm.
their book came out and I haven't taken them to a tournament yet. So I just want to take them and have fun, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that, and did have a lot of fun. And people were coming up to me like after each game, "Hey, did you get her?" And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, good job." And like after the first day, they're like, "Well, 3-0 at GSE, wow." And I'm like, I
Mm-hmm.
know, like, but that is the world we're living in right now. Like that is the common perception, is like, you're winning games with this army, you must be awesome. And it's like
Oh
armies
yeah.
shouldn't be that way.
It,
you
it
know
was
and
yeah. I was just gonna say on the beginning of day 2 at Nova, my first game was on table 1, and like the awestruck look that people had of like, what's Gene Sealers doing up here? You guys are supposed to be fucking terrible. Like
I know,
get back down to table 200, scrub.
no, right? And like
Yeah.
that doesn't feel great, but it does make, like, once you get juice from the squeeze, like you're like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, this feels good. I know I earned it. I
Yeah.
deserve
Oh
being
yeah.
here. I don't even care about
Hmm.
that battle painted thing. Stay up till 2 in the morning like a real man. Pay your army.
Yeah, exactly.
We've all been
Come
there.
to oh dude, yeah, I painted I think 40 neophytes in 2 days once, and
Fights
I
are
wanted
the
to vomit.
worst. Like,
I
oh
want
my
to
gosh.
vomit. Yeah. It was awful. So well, congrats again. Awesome performance.
Thank you.
Looking to the future, I don't know if you have any events planned coming up soon. But is there anything that you want to change? Do you want to try a different detachment? Revisit some lists, or you are you happy just continuing on what you got?
Um, I have another GT this time in Edmonton coming up. It's on the weekend of the 19th, 20th of whatever of October. So it's basically a month
Mm,
away from this last one. It's
hmm
even larger. I think it's 70 or 78 people, and it's already sold
mm.
out.
Oh wow.
It's a 2 day one, so it's going to be a bigger one. I'm going to take, I think, the exact same list
Hmm
to that GT. I'm a little bit worried that people would be like, okay, Gord just went 5-0 with this list, so like I'll have a little bit more tech because I'm on the player roster in
hmm
BCP. So like I know I'm gonna not have as much like efficacy from the surprise factor because people will be like researching my stuff and what it
hmm
does, and they'll have like a better game plan into that, and they'll be able to talk to people and who have the experience into the list and that type of stuff. So I know I'm going to lose some efficacy there, but I'm just I had so much fun with the list, and this last Thursday I actually busted my Eldar out because I was like, man, I've been playing my GSC for like the last like couple months, like playing lists with Broodsurge, and I had like no guns, right? I'm like, you know what?
hmm
I'm just gonna do a little palette cleanser and it takes some guns. And I got absolutely windmill slammed. And I thought it would like make me appreciate Eldar more because I was like, like I haven't been playing with guns, and now we're gonna have like bright lances and it's gonna be
Yeah.
sweet. And the whole time I was just like, man, I wish I was playing my aberrant list right now. Like it just made me appreciate the list even more for what it
hmm
does, how
hmm
well it complements itself. It's so direct in its purpose. It's so purposeful in its mission
hmm
design, its combat design, everything about it. It did not make me feel like I missed my Eldar at all.
hmm
And it's not about like the win loss or anything like that. It was like he was moving up on objectives, and I'm like, man, I wish I could swarm those with Gene Steelers right now. Oh,
Yeah.
he's got this pocket in his backfield. Man, I wish I could drop my recurring unit of aberrants back there. It was
hmm
just like everything I saw in that game. I was just like, man, I wish I was playing my GSC list right now. And and it just looks so sweet. I put so much time into like getting my army fully highlighted and everything done before the event. Now, as far as what changes I would make to the list leading into that event, none.
Done.
Everything. I think every model in that list, I look at it and I'm like, I will not do without you. Like I'm not
Yeah.
going to do without the extra CP from the Acolyte squad. I You need, like, I'd say the two Ridge runners, right, to get AP3 where you need it, and also just to keep people a little bit more honest, or like a random spore mine will or land somewhere, and you need to be able to clear it out, things like that, right?
hmm
And you need something screening your backfield. That's the thing, is like I probably couldn't drop one of the Ridge Runners just for screening. Nothing else wants to stand back there. Ridge Runner's on a pretty big base, and he takes
hmm
up quite a bit of real estate back there to screen your deployment zone. This list doesn't terribly care if your opponent sweeps into your backfield and takes your backfield objective. It's very mission dependent, obviously, but there's a ton of missions that who cares if you're on your home objective, like
hmm
they either don't score points or don't matter more than taking their home objective. Like you could just let them toilet bowl you, right, and take theirs and
hmm
they take yours and whatever. And so the big changes though is a lot of talk about data slate right now, coming up. And I know a
hmm
lot of people are like, when's the data slate? When's the data slate? And people were thinking it could even have been this past Thursday, but then, AOS dropped on Wednesday and people are like, okay, I guess not. And then there's also a
hmm
massive tournament this weekend. So
Yeah.
obviously, like, I don't think they want to shake it up. So people are expecting that there could be a data slate in our very near future. And
hmm
honestly, GSC hasn't done great. I expect, if anything, we get buffs.
hmm
Um, and if any of my points drop enough, that 5-man Gene Stealers is going to a 10. That's going to be the first thing that happens. I didn't feel like I needed more. independent activations, like, like little abominants walking around or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that the first thing that happens is that unit goes to a 10 so that I can start rolling for ten guys to come back at a time when I roll on it.
Mhm.
That'd be the first thing. If we got 75 points worth of buffs, that's the first thing I would do. But that's really going to be the only thing that impacts my list. If we come back somehow and aberrants go up, my mind would be blown, honestly,
Mhm.
if they decide to crank aberrants. Um, I'd be looking at doing a massive shakeup. Like if aberrants go up like 5 points a model somehow, I would
Mhm.
one stages of grief. I'd have to go
Yeah,
through
exactly.
it. You know,
I will be
that
crying.
might take me past the deadline for the tournament. Um, if they go up, like then we're looking at a total list redesign because there's so many of them that it would fundamentally rock the list, and there's really nothing I could drop out of the list, to
I
do it.
don't
So
think that there is a universe where aberrants get anywhere close to a nerf in any fashion, points or. But yeah, I mean, even though GSC has been doing well recently, thanks to the help of guys like you and Innis and Eric Lathuris and a bunch of these other guys, uh, the overall win rate is still very bad. It's still, I think it's might have hit 40 now. It might be out of the high 30s, which is great. So still not great. Still not great. So I definitely think like my boy the Primus, like give that boy should not be 90 points. Like what the
dude,
fuck are we
dude,
talking about?
the Benefactus is a joke for
Yeah.
80 points. It's 80,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah, he's 80 points.
Like
It makes me want to vomit.
it is absolutely insane. Like the buffs that GSC need is points reductions on the characters. Like
Yeah.
GSD, like I get that we pay a little bit of a points tax for units that might come back. Characters don't come back, so just point them for what they do.
Yeah,
You know they're
exactly.
only doing that thing once, so don't charge us. Like in the Magus, oh my gosh, like what a cool
Oh.
model that never gets to see the table since 10th. Like,
Oh yeah.
can we please like do something about like dropping the points on these like 80 plus point characters that are
Hmm.
absolutely not worth it? Like they don't come back. You're typically making them more expensive with enhancements. So I think
Hmm.
like if GSC, and I think it would open a lot of build variety for the other detachments. Like I think Xenocreed starts stepping up because I think personally, Claw Surge are the clear winners of the two detachments.
What was that?
Xenocreed,
You cut out there.
sorry,
What were
I Claw and Broodsurge, in my opinion, are the best of the detachments, like by a clear
Mhm.
margin. I think Xenocreed has great things in it, and it's a third place. But the problem with Xenocreed is what I've kind of been hitting on is you end up with sweet units at the start of the game. Your army rule does not recreate sweet units; it recreates mediocre units.
Mhm.
Um, and that is a big difference between it and Biosurge because there's a lot of crossover between those two. Like they're stepping on each other's toes a little bit. It's like one's like, oh, I get pluses to charge, and the other one's like, I advance and charge. Woo!
Mhm.
It's like there is a lot of crossover there. But Broodsurge is like die and they come back. Guess what? They're aberrants.
Mhm.
And
Exactly.
they're still getting +1 to charge, and they're still getting +1 attack. And when
Mhm.
metamorphs die and they come back, you're like, ew, like
Yeah.
what is this? This isn't even a
Yeah.
shadow of its former self, And so I think
Absolutely.
if you brought down the price on characters, you would even that out a little bit more because it wouldn't become this like super counter play thing, and it would help Xenocreed kind of come back in there, and it would help Host of Ascension as well. Because Host of Ascension, I mean, I know you've been playing lots of Host of Ascension, that's what you took to Nova,
Mhm.
but it's like you probably felt the same. It's like go through in your mind how many points you have in characters that don't come back
Oh,
and
I
are on
had
in
500 points of characters.
and they're on units coming in to die.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, no, I think I had like 400, 460, I think, points of care, and you needed them. You fucking needed all those.
And that's
Um,
it. You need them,
yeah,
or your units are total limp. Like they just
oh
come
yeah,
in and they're nothing, right? Like that's what I like about gene stealers. Like I know people complain about gene stealers, and like I even saw somebody say like, "Oh, gene stealers need like twin linked." I'm like, gene stealers are straight broken with twin link, dude. Like they're
oh yeah,
15 points a model for infiltrate, advance, and charge. 2 wounds. They have an invuln. They're 5 attacks on the charge and Broodsurge. They hit on twos. Like gene stealers are amazing.
yeah.
Like
You
they're
give them twin
they're
link
they're a
and
great unit.
every yeah, and then everyone's playing Broodsurge and bringing 30 of them, and that's just how it goes.
I know we need more list diversity, not less. The fact that we do have multiple detachments winning different events, though, is a great feeling. Like,
Yeah,
there's lots of factions who are like shedding a tear when they're like, everyone says GC is horrible, and they still have multiple detachments winning. you know,
yeah,
like there's a lot of factions who would honestly be a little bit envious of the fact that we can play a couple of different ways. Like I think you definitely can play Outlander Claw is obviously great, and because it's really self reinforcing, like Broodsurge, it's just in a different way, right? And then
hmm
Broodsurge is great, and then I think in a close third you have Xenocreed, and then like kind of right behind that you have Host. Host is
hmm
a little scattered for me. Like I know it's like we're gonna come in and we're gonna do this thing, but I'm like, okay, that is great for a turn. What do you got? Like I need to know what your plan is. List, like this is me talking the list, right? What is
hmm
your plan on turn 4 and 5? Strike in.
Oh yeah,
What is
no
your
host.
turn?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like it just
hmm
runs out of steam, right? Like one of the
hmm
classic problems of Gene Stealer Cult is like, us, we just like come out of the gate, massive haymaker. How many games have you played with GSD against your opponent where your opponent's like, this is insane, your army's broken because of like turn 1 and turn 2, and you're like,
oh
don't
yeah,
worry. As soon as you start making attacks, you're not going to feel that way.
exactly.
And I'm
Everything
just
is
like got
going
a
to
shovel.
die. Don't worry.
Yeah, you're just
No, that's
shoveling your
actually.
models off the table. But whereas, like, one of the nice things about Broodsurge and one of the nice
Mhm.
things about Outlander Claw is they both have a plan of what does turns 3, 4, 5 look like. Right? It
Absolutely.
looks like
Yeah.
bringing your models back and doing the same thing you've been doing all game. Host of
hmm
Ascension can literally physically cannot say we're going to bring our units back and do the same thing we've been doing all game. They can't
Yeah.
say that because it's without
hmm
characters and it's not from Deep Strike. So
hmm
like that bit of a
Yeah.
shakeup in the pricing of characters and things like that, then we could see a little bit more diversity. But I think as far as the detachments for GSD, those two being able to reinforce their game plan for 5 rounds is what makes them the
hmm
clear winners.
Yeah. Well, I will say so I actually have been doing a 60 neophyte list in Xenocreed, and that's been doing pretty well for me. Just like because I know traditionally everyone was very like, okay, Xenocreed's acolytes. Like, take every acolyte you fucking can, every metamorph you can, shove them into trucks, and go forth, go beat up things and get them back and go do it again. The so the Xenocreed has the strat where you essentially get Oath of Moment on a target that kills, a big character.
Mm-hmm.
So Primus Magus, Icon Ward. So when those neophytes come back, they come back re-rolling all hits against that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which has and throw in survey augurs on your ridge runners, and you're gaming. You know what I mean? I have a unit of 2 ridge runners with lasers, so they get to re-roll hits against any of those guys that killed the Primus, or any of those characters. And those neophytes are up the board turn 1. They're It's not like they're hanging
yeah,
on deep strike. They're fucking there. It's like either kill them or have 40 OC on midboard. I don't care. That's up to you. I'm chilling, dude. I'm
totally.
I'm just playing my game. You kill them, I get them back. I get to reroll hits against you forever. Don't kill them, I get to score primary. Like it's up to you. But yeah,
And I will say for Xenocreed, that Primus with the +1 to hit and wound against character units
oh, he's
in
a
a
fucker.
20-man neophyte, that
Oh
guy
yeah,
is no joke. Like
oh yeah.
when I played with like 4 melee bombs, basically like 2 acolytes that each had
Hmm.
Primuses, and then 2 metamorphs that had biophaguses. And then I
Hmm.
played with the Primus with that on in a
Hmm.
Neo Blob. Man, that thing killed like 2 greater demons itself in the game.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
blob, like holy moly!
Yeah,
Because here's the thing: every unit that's worth literally like anything in the game has either a character in it or is a giant character monster
or as a
thing.
character. Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
yeah, so it's like that is so good. And on the neophyte blob, like that unit sexes for 20 guys with the reroll hits and +1 to hit, +1 to wound. That unit
Hmm.
definitely isn't here to mess around.
No,
Um,
it'll kill a
so,
knight. It'll kill a knight, no problem. I mean, shotguns are wounding on fives.
I
Like
know.
okay, take a bajillion saves. Like you're gonna fail most of them or half of them.
Yeah,
Give them +1
exactly.
AP, ignores cover. Like they'll fuck.
Oh yeah,
That is not a
totally.
problem. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
that is a really nice unit.
yeah, but I do have to start wrapping things up. So I wanted the last thing I want to do is so you and I are both big dad hammer guys. Having
Mhm.
having a I think you said you had was it 4 or 5
Five,
kids? Five.
five, yeah.
God bless you. Yeah, you got you got 5 kids at home. I got 3 kids at home. What is your advice to other dads out there to like being able to get better at Warhammer while still, staying married and not having your kids hate you?
Well, that is the big one, right?
Mhm.
Life is so much about balance, and
Mhm.
I only, and I say only with quotations because we're very fortunate to be able to enjoy the hobbies that we do. I go to
Yeah.
game night on Thursdays, so how much practice I'm going to get until the next tournament? Because how many Thursdays are there? And that's assuming
Mhm.
nothing goes sideways, right? Or there's
Yeah.
parent teacher conferences or whatever. Like I'm a teacher in real life, so it's like those are always
Mhm.
on Thursdays out of my school, and so life like happens, right?
Mhm.
And the big thing is like um, I like gaming is like a big release for me. I love it. And I love it when there's no aggro associated to it. And so if you're like a family guy and you're pushing gaming super hard and you're getting aggro for it, and that's making gaming not great for you because you're paying a cost for it and things like that. I think that's a big time negative experience. Um,
Mhm.
and it's tough to be gone for like an entire weekend to a GT, like in another city,
Mhm.
stay at a hotel overnight, right? And then the wife's with the kids and all those things, and like I'm very grateful for her and holding down the fort while I'm gone and things like that. Um,
Mhm.
but then when I'm on those times, I'm really there for like for me. You know what I mean? So like I feel like
Mhm.
by if I pay balance over on the grand scheme, then in those times I can really be there. So on Thursdays, I'm getting dedicated practice in, right? My
Mhm.
attention's not split. They know like I'm 100% home when I'm home, and then I'm 100% gone when I'm gone. So
Mhm.
I get to focus on my games really hard. I specifically pick opponents. Like I tell my opponents straight up, I'm practicing for GTs.
Mhm.
This is the arena that if we're playing on Thursday that you're walking into, because I can't afford to waste those game nights. Like if I throw away a game to like a nothing, like somebody was like, haha, I don't really care or whatever, that's a big loss for me because that means I'm going 2 weeks without
Yeah.
getting a real game in, you know? So make your practice purposeful, right? Make your game time purposeful, making sure your game time is filling your bucket so that your love, your passion of it is like really fueling you during the games. So that you're really enjoying being at a tournament, right? Like I think for most of us, like going to game nights, like your friends are there. I'm constantly messaging friends and things like that about games as well. Even opportunities like this to like speak about gaming and stuff. I'm obviously
Mhm.
we're all really passionate about it, right? So I say
Mhm.
the best advice for like dads is like be balanced, right? Like gaming is not more important than your family, and then like let gaming fuel you, guilt free, because you're living a nice balanced life, and
Hmm.
make sure you're appreciating, that we're able to do this, and like, the partners in our lives that facilitate us being able to do this, and that type of thing.
Hmm.
So and just really not kind of overstepping, I think, is the greatest key to getting that practice in, and then making sure, knowing how limited your practice is going to be, that you're very purposeful with it. And
Hmm.
so like I feel really guilty saying this, right? But like I don't join slow grows. Like I don't join slow grow leagues because I can't spend my Thursday playing 500-point games. Like
Yeah.
I need to be practicing for tournaments and things like that. And my wife, she knows nothing about Warhammer, really, right? But when I was torn about the Aberrants, and I said, I've been playing this list. My friend says I should play the list. I've been practicing. And then she literally picked up an Aberrant and was like, this guy's really cool. What's he called? I'm like, he's like an Aberrant. She's like, how many of them are you allowed to take? And I'm like, I can take 30. And she's like, do that.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay. And I submitted my list like an hour later. Like,
Hmm.
it's really is about balance, and keeping that kind of stuff in mind. That's it for me, anyways.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Gord. Any last hurrahs, any last closing thoughts that you have that you'd like to give to the greater Gene Stealer Cult community?
Roll 4 ups on turns to 1, 2, and 3, and roll 5 ups on turns, or sorry, 3, 4, 5, and
Yeah.
you'll do just fine.
Yeah.
And if not, at least you'll be having fun.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks guys for tuning in, and we'll see you around next time. Thanks.